Okay, so ready to dive in. Today, we're looking at cognitive load theory.
That's good.
And just to get us started, I mean, at its most basic level, it's all about how we process information and how we learn,
Right.
but importantly, the limits of our working memory.
Hmm.
And that's like your mental workspace, right?
Yeah.
So think about it like this. You can only really keep, what, like 4 or 5 things actively in mind at once?
Yeah.
And even then, it's only for like 20 seconds, tops.
Yeah. It's a very limited resource.
So here's where things get a little bit more interesting, I think. Like when you actually learn something, it kind of changes this whole working memory situation by building those connections in your long-term memory.
Hmm.
And then it creates these organized, like, chunks of knowledge called schemas,
Right.
which then allow you to handle a lot more information because it's not all just floating around independently.
Exactly. And I think, the traditional view of this whole working memory thing was that those limitations applied equally to all types of information.
Oh, interesting.
But there's a new perspective that's emerging, and it suggests that, maybe our brains don't treat all information the same way.
Okay.
And this is where we get into the distinction between what we call biologically primary knowledge versus biologically secondary knowledge.
Okay, I like that. So biologically primary knowledge.
Yeah.
It sounds like that stuff that, we're just naturally, like, primed to learn.
Yeah.
So for you, what are some examples of that?
So these are the things that our brains have kind of evolved to pick up easily, often without any formal teaching or instruction. So, think about things like recognizing faces,
Yeah.
understanding basic emotions, learning to speak your first language.
Right.
These are all things that, for you, they just seem to happen almost automatically.
Right. You don't need to, like, crack open a textbook to figure
Like,
out who your mom is.
right.
Or, like, how to smile.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's biologically primary. So then biologically secondary knowledge, I'm guessing, is kind of the other side of that,
Precisely.
where you have to, like, work at it?
Yeah. So this is the information that is, it's culturally important, obviously.
Right.
But it requires explicit learning. So we're talking about things like reading, writing, mathematics, history, all of those sorts of things.
Nope.
These things actually demand conscious effort from you and often some kind of formal education. Your brain hasn't specifically evolved to handle these things in the same automatic way that it does the primary knowledge.
That makes a lot of sense. So given, your working memory limitations and that this biologically secondary knowledge is the stuff that your working memory might struggle with more, that's what we're really trying to figure out today, right?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Like, how do we leverage that biologically primary knowledge, the stuff we learn naturally, to make learning the harder stuff a little bit easier?
Yeah. And, there are some truly surprising ways that this appears to happen.
Okay, I'm really curious now. So where do we jump in first?
Let's start with something called the collective working memory effect. And I want you to just think about your own, you're an individual, you have your own working memory, it has limitations.
Right.
But what happens when people work together on a problem?
Oh, well, it's like you have more brain power collectively.
Right. Exactly. That's the
And more people, more brains.
more working memory. So the idea is that, you have a group of people that are collaborating, and they can be viewed as a single, larger information processing system.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to look at it.
You're welcome. So you
All right.
basically have multiple working memories all contributing to this one big pot, so to speak. So you're effectively creating greater collective working space for the group as a whole,
Oh, that's really cool.
isn't it?
And this really connects to our natural ability to communicate.
Right. No,
It's like
come on.
that's a primary thing.
So, humans have evolved to communicate and share information.
Right.
It's a fundamental, biologically primary ability.
Yeah.
And through, just simple conversation and collaboration, you naturally borrow and reorganize information from each other's long-term memory.
So it's almost like, when you're struggling with something and then you talk it out with a colleague
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly, like, the solution just becomes clear.
Exactly.
It's like they said something. Or even just the act of explaining it all kind of clicks.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Well, you're essentially offloading some of the cognitive burden onto the other person's working memory and their existing knowledge base.
Right.
But of course, there are always trade-offs.
Right, because it can't be beneficial in every situation, right?
Right.
So what are some of the potential downsides of working together?
So for you, while the overall mental strain on whatever that task is might be reduced, you have to factor in the added cognitive effort of communication and coordination.
Oh, right.
So, you have to be able to articulate your thoughts clearly. You
Yeah.
have to understand other people's perspectives, and you have to agree on strategies together. And that all requires energy, mental energy.
No, that totally resonates. I mean, just like casual conversation, that's easy.
Yeah.
But when you try and explain like a complex project to somebody that's never heard of it before, it's exhausting
Absolutely.
for both people.
And so, general communication skills, those are likely biologically primary. They have a lower cognitive cost. But when we get into task-specific communication, where you have to use precise language and coordinate intricate actions, that's when things can get a lot more taxing.
Right.
And it leans more towards that biologically secondary end of the spectrum.
Okay, so it sounds like, it's not always better to work together.
Right.
Does the research kind of support that?
Well, research suggests that collaborative learning tends to be more effective than individual learning when the tasks themselves have a high cognitive load.
Okay.
So basically, when it's stuff that you might struggle to process all the information on your own, that's when it makes sense to bring in more people. However, if you have tasks with a low cognitive load where one person can easily handle it, then the benefits of collaboration decrease, and the communication overhead actually makes it less efficient.
That makes a lot of sense. So if it's simple, just do it yourself. But if it's complex, get a team together.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, face-to-face communication is particularly important. Why is that for you?
Because face-to-face communication is such a highly developed, biologically primary skill. You've evolved to interpret nonverbal cues, understand tone of voice, and interact in real time, and that reduces a lot of the mental friction that you might experience if you're trying to do something, say, just through written communication.
Right. Or like, texting back and forth about a complex problem versus just like sitting down, hashing it out.
Exactly.
Okay, so our inherent ability to connect face-to-face and communicate, that really helps us share the mental load. What's another way that our primary skills can give us a boost when learning new things?
So the next really fascinating area is what's called the human movement effect.
Ooh, okay.
Now, you might assume that dynamic visuals, like animations, would always be a better way to learn compared to static images.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you'd think seeing something in action would make it clearer.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's not always the case.
Really, why not?
So, in many cases, animations can actually create what we call a high extraneous cognitive load. So, this is mental effort that doesn't directly contribute to you understanding the material, but it arises from, how the information is presented.
Right,
Like, for example, it could be a confusing animation. It could be, text that's poorly structured.
Right.
And that fleeting nature of animation, things appearing and disappearing very rapidly, it can overload your working memory.
Ah, okay. So it's like you're trying to follow something, but it's moving too fast, so it takes a lot of energy just to track it.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. When it comes to teaching human motor skills, animations can actually be more effective than static graphics.
Wait, that's surprising.
I know. It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But there's a reason for it. And it all comes down to something called your mirror neuron system.
Okay.
So, your brain has this amazing ability to respond similarly when you perform an action yourself and when you simply observe someone else doing that same action.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this is very deeply rooted in biologically primary knowledge. We've evolved to observe and imitate human movement.
So like for you, if you watch someone tie a knot, it's activating similar parts of your brain as if you were physically tying the knot.
That's exactly it.
Oh, wow.
And then there's also something called the common coding principle. And this suggests that when you perceive the outcome of an action, it engages the same brain systems involved in planning that action.
Oh, okay.
So it's this really tight connection between perception and action. So think about watching somebody reach for a cup. Your brain starts to activate the motor areas as if you were reaching for the cup.
Oh, wow.
Even though you're not actually doing it. So by seeing someone perform a task, you're kind of priming your brain to do it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so studies have actually shown that learners perform better when observing these dynamic representations of tasks that involve human movement,
Okay.
like origami or tying knots. compared to when they just look at static images. And this is especially true when they then go on to physically perform those tasks themselves.
Oh, that's so cool. So it's like the animation, it's not just showing you the steps.
Mm-hmm.
It's like activating that part of your brain that innately wants to learn by watching movement.
Exactly.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's so cool, and it raises a really intriguing possibility. Like, could we leverage this human movement effect to teach knowledge that isn't even motor-based?
Oh, interesting.
Could we somehow incorporate these representations of human action to explain abstract concepts more effectively?
Oh, wow.
It's something that people are actively researching right now?
Wow, that is a thought-provoking idea.
Huh.
Okay, so we've got collaboration, which leverages our communication skills. We've got animations of movement that tap into our mirror neurons. What's the third way that primary knowledge helps us learn the secondary stuff?
The third area is embodied cognition.
Okay.
And this is the idea that your cognitive processes are deeply intertwined with your physical interactions with the world.
Okay.
Your perception, your actions. Your understanding isn't solely about manipulating these abstract symbols in your mind.
So it's not all in your head.
Right.
Our bodies play a role in how we think and learn.
Absolutely. That's the core of it. And when we look at leveraging biologically primary knowledge here, two key sensoromotor experiences come into play: gesture and object manipulation.
Okay, so gestures, like when we talk with our hands.
Exactly. And that's something we do naturally, so it has to be primary.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, humans have likely been gesturing for much longer than we've had complex spoken language.
Wow.
It's a very natural way for you to communicate and express your understanding. And research shows that both learners and teachers use gesture to convey meaning.
Oh, for sure. I catch myself doing it all the time,
Right.
especially when I'm trying to explain something complex.
Right.
It just feels natural.
It is. It's innate. And it's not just for emphasis either.
Okay.
Studies have shown that students understand messages better when they include both speech and gesture.
Oh, wow.
And even just observing a teacher's gestures can actually improve children's learning in subjects like math and science.
So a teacher using hand movements while explaining a concept is actually helping students understand it better.
It seems so.
Wow.
And it's not just passive watching either. Research has also shown that when students are encouraged to gesture while they're solving problems themselves, they tend to learn more effectively.
Interesting. It's like the physical act of gesturing is almost solidifying the concept in their minds.
Yeah, there's something to that. And this is really crucial. There's evidence that gesturing can actually reduce the load on your working memory during instruction.
Wait, hold on. How does moving your hands free up mental space?
That's a great question. So researchers have done these really clever secondary task experiments. So they'll have students learn something, but at the same time, they'll ask them to try and remember a list of words.
Right.
So it's like two things at once.
Hmm.
And what they found is that when students were allowed to gesture while they were learning, they were actually able to remember more words from that secondary task,
Oh, wow.
implying that gesturing actually lessened the cognitive burden of that primary learning task.
That is wild. So we're freeing up brain power for learning by using our hands.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's pretty incredible. And the fascinating thing is that gesturing helps even when the objects being discussed aren't physically present.
Oh, okay.
So the idea is that gesture uses this visuospatial format, which can complement the verbal information.
Right.
And it provides another way for you to represent and process that information. So it's easing the strain on your verbal working memory.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's gestures. What about physically interacting with objects, like object manipulation?
Yes. So there's this really interesting intervention called moved by reading. And in these studies, researchers, they give children toys that represent elements of a story that they're reading. And when they encounter like a significant sentence, they're prompted to act it out using the toys.
Oh, okay. So like if the sentence is the cat jumped on the table, they would physically move the toy cat onto the toy table.
Exactly. And the results were pretty remarkable. The kids who physically manipulated those toys showed significantly better reading comprehension compared to those who simply reread the sentences.
Wow, okay.
And interestingly, even just manipulating images on a computer screen had a positive effect.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it seems like the real physical object isn't always necessary. It's that act of creating that physical or visual representation that's key.
Okay, so it's not just about hearing the words.
Right.
It's about taking that extra step to really embody it.
Exactly. And it's interesting to compare this to listening.
Mm-hmm.
So listening to spoken text, that's also biologically primary.
Right.
But object manipulation might not be as essential for understanding something you hear as it is for understanding something you read.
Okay.
Because reading, as you know, is biologically secondary.
Right.
And so that added cognitive load of decoding written words, that might be where the object manipulation really provides the biggest benefit.
That makes a lot of sense. You're having to work harder to process the written word, to
Yeah.
that physical interaction that gives you another way to kind of anchor the information,
Exactly.
make those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And, while we have really strong evidence suggesting that gesturing reduces working memory load, the research on object manipulation and its effect on working memory load is still ongoing. But, the evidence we do have very strongly suggests that both gesture and object manipulation, being these well-established, easily acquired skills, can be really powerful tools for kind of offloading working memory when you're dealing with that biologically secondary knowledge.
This is also insightful. It's like we have all these advantages just baked in just from how we've evolved.
It's pretty cool.
So what are some of the broader implications of this whole primary versus secondary knowledge distinction?
Well, so consider what's called mindful movement in cooperative learning.
Okay.
So there was this study where they had children physically form a circle to learn about the properties of a circle.
Oh, okay.
So, you're integrating a primary skill of movement with cooperative learning, and it turned out to be really effective, particularly for younger children who were still developing their verbal interaction skills.
Okay, yeah.
So that's an example of how, even for you, physical engagement can really enhance group learning.
That's a really cool example of blending these primary and secondary abilities, taking advantage of all the tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely. And think about the modality effect.
Okay.
So this is the idea that we often learn better when the information is presented both visually and through audio.
Okay.
And it's particularly powerful when it's spoken text as opposed to written text.
Yeah.
And this likely taps into your evolved ability to listen and look simultaneously, which is primary, unlike the secondary skill of reading.
Right.
But, importantly for you, this effect can actually reverse if that spoken text gets too long or too complex.
Oh, interesting.
Again, it illustrates the limits of our auditory working memory.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
It's about knowing your limits and knowing when to bring in other ways of learning.
Yeah. It's about strategically using our natural strengths as learners.
I like that. So it sounds like this primary and secondary thing, it's not always like black and white, right?
Right. It's likely more of a continuum. The clearest indicator for you is whether a skill is typically acquired without formal instruction.
Okay.
If you need formal instruction, that means it's likely secondary.
Got it.
If you don't, it's probably primary.
And this has implications for how we think about teaching general skills.
Yeah. So the idea is that some skills that we spend a lot of time researching and trying to explicitly teach, things like general problem solving, might actually be largely biologically primary.
Oh, interesting.
So if you've already evolved to have this general ability, then trying to teach it explicitly could be very difficult or maybe even impossible.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying that maybe instead of trying to teach somebody how to problem solve in general, maybe we should be looking at how do we get them to apply their natural problem solving abilities to specific situations.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway.
And I think you touched on something earlier, that even though these primary skills, we don't need to be explicitly taught how to do them, the ways that we kind of ensure that they get learned, those are probably primary too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things like demonstrating how to do something.
Right, what we call natural pedagogy.
Natural pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
And our ability to generalize from just one instance. Like you see something once, and you can kind of extrapolate from that.
One trial learning.
One trial learning.
Mm.
That's got to be primary, right? You don't need to be taught how to generalize. You just do it.
Exactly. And it's something you do naturally.
Yeah.
And so, it's really interesting to think about because understanding this whole distinction between primary and secondary knowledge, it can really help us to design better ways for you to learn by tapping into these fundamental human abilities.
This has been a truly illuminating deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've learned a lot today.
Yeah.
So just to summarize, I guess, we learn complex things more easily when we can connect them to our kind of evolved, biologically primary ways of processing information.
Mm-hmm.
So that's through things like collaboration,
Right.
observing movement, and engaging our bodies, through gesture and manipulation.
Yeah, and these aren't just kind of interesting add-ons to learning. They really seem to be fundamental to the way your brain is wired to acquire information efficiently.
So for you, the listener,
Yeah.
think about the learning that you do.
Sure.
Are there ways that you could consciously incorporate these more fundamental, almost intuitive approaches? Like,
Yeah.
how could you deepen your understanding
Mm-hmm.
and reduce your mental overload?
Yeah. What primary skills could you leverage in your own learning or when you're explaining things to other people? It's definitely something to consider.
Absolutely. And we definitely encourage you to go out and kind of delve further into these ideas. Look into cognitive load theory. Explore the differences between biologically primary and secondary knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the research on embodied cognition. There's a wealth of fascinating information out there just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting area of research.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive today.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next time.
Sounds good.